I'm sitting here with Mike Handsome, who is our finance director, could I say? Or is that the proper
Yeah,
title?
yeah,
Yep.
Director of Finance.
For Kelowna Christian School, and has done, in my personal opinion, a wonderful job over the last, how many years has it been?
13 years.
13 years. He has quite a story here of taking a school which was in dire straits financially in 2008 to where it is today, and has really mapped a course for our school in terms of what does it look like to emulate the values of our school within a financial setting, and through his actions and his exemplary actions, has demonstrated that. So I wanted to let Mike, though, share his story of how he has done this, and how he's strived to emulate our values within our school. So, Mike, thank you very much, and please enlighten us.
Well, I'll just use our framework of our own Kelowna Christian School values as a platform to speak on. I think what works very well is that you have someone like me in my role who has personal values that are very much aligned to the organizational values. And so in my role, some of the values that we'll talk about at the school level are also personal values. And so that enables me to do my job with, I guess, greater ease than what someone who doesn't share those values would. But our Kelowna Christian School values, I'll just list them: biblical foundation, prayer, creativity, excellence, perseverance, and integrity. So when I think about my role here, I think very much of my role as being a good steward. And they're not my resources, they're God's resources, of course. And I think in everything that I do, I'm accountable with our senior leadership, our staff, our families, is that whatever we do, we do it with good stewardship in mind. And that means making some tough decisions at times, etc. But what we have tried to do, our very best, is align our budget to those things that we define to be important, our mission and vision, and exemplify our values. And so more than ever before, when I first started here 13 years, is starting to embed within the budget specific financial resources that enable those values to be lived out or help us move along to accomplish our mission and vision. And it comes under that quick analogy: put your money where your mouth is. If these things are important, these values are important, then show me the money that you're investing to help you maintain or achieve and sustain those values going forward. So I could show you examples in the specific budget where those lined out, and the board requested that we see tangible evidence of those strategic objectives and the action plans were to achieve those. Monies have been put aside for that. And so that's relatively new. One change is even in our financial reporting is that we have a new line called discipleship, because we're a discipleship school. It's a core to our mission and vision. And so we wanted to communicate through our financial reporting that there's money put aside to enable discipleship to happen. Rather than tucking it in, is more or less to bring it to the surface and expose it. Could we do more? Always. But at least it's a start, and some things occur from that. But from a biblical foundation, I just listed some few examples. In our budgeting process, we got to make sure that there's curricular resources, discipleship resources. Our course and timetable is supportive of that. So there's human resources that are assigned to discipleship. And in planning human resources, even thinking about specific roles. We're not there yet, but what would a director of spiritual life and formation look like? Or how would that enable and support what we're trying to do? And at the end of the day, how do we model stewardship and generosity? And that often happens in how we treat our staff, comparable to other organizations like us, or even how we support our families through financial aid. And when we do have the opportunity resources, is try to be as generous as we can. So that models a lot about biblical foundation. Prayer is our second core value. Um, it wouldn't surprise anybody that when I go into our process and the routines that we do, is prayer is a part of it. I know as a finance committee and as a board, we pray about our budgets. And we're good stewards that we make, that we are aligned to God's will for this school. It's His school, it's not ours. So how do we help do that? As far as creativity, a third value, there isn't a day or week goes by where we're pinched with a challenge, where something goes sideways, something we couldn't foresee, and we had to be creative to find solutions, finding the resources. And it's often demonstrated through flexibility, where a positive variance helps cover a negative variance in our budget planning process. But the creativity also is looking at multiple ways to address a financial problem. Fourth value is excellence. And just the nature, and this is where the alignment of our personal value aligns to a school value. It's true to my heart that if I'm going to do something, it's going to be done right and to the very best of my ability. And I feel a huge burden on my shoulders, not just to go through the motions with a budgeting process or financial management of the school, that I better have good understanding, manage by fact, do my due diligence, and what I call is creating a very tight draft or revised budgets. You could throw numbers on a page or on a spreadsheet and make them all balance, but are they realistic? So where this shows up is the amount of time, effort, and energy I go in to seek first to understand patterns and costs, expenses, all the variables that go into that could move a budget this way or that way. And I try to go very deep. And so that when the numbers do land, they're pretty close to being on budget. You'll find some organizations maybe don't go through the level of detail that I do. And so what they have is a large contingency fund just to manage what could possibly happen. And we don't manage a contingency fund here. What we manage is real life time. If there's a positive and negative variance, we work together as a team and try to land the plane on the budget come June 30th at year end. So the excellence portion really comes into managing to the bottom line. It's managing risk as a leadership team through regular reporting. And we're always aware there's open communication, there's transparency. We manage by truth and fact. We don't make a lot of gut assumptions because we don't hope that we'll achieve our budget. Hope's not a strategy. We can hope in the Lord, but not on our bottom line. And we have a number of internal controls that help us make sure that we're being good stewards. There's a lot of regulation and compliance requirements within the financial industry, and we apply them here to make sure that we're being truthful. We maintain integrity as well, and that's the last of our values. And integrity comes into play most often when you have to say no, or sometimes do something that is unpopular, but it's the right thing to do for the organization, both as staff and families, etc. Always balancing those tensions. So we try to model that. And in a time such as this that we're going through COVID-19 pandemic, perseverance is a big part of it. We came through a very difficult time when I started here. You mentioned that in your introduction, where we saw declining enrollment, and we had to persevere, and really manage our expenses well, and we had to build up reserves, and we had to manage debt. And now we're coming out of that, we're growing our enrollment, and we're a much better place today. And equally so, as much as we have to be so cautious and a good steward in good or bad times, we have to do that in good times too. Just because we have the resources now doesn't mean we just get to be thrifty or spend them away and not careful. So it always comes down to good stewardship for me, and my personal practices of integrity and excellence support that. So I think that's what I can share.
Thank you very much, Mike. One question for you here is when it comes to reporting the budget, or as you had mentioned, where the board has actually asked for indicators, performance indicators, how well are we on budget? How well are we doing with what we've done? And you've mentioned I then go ahead and report that. Does that then play back to your accounting practices itself? So based on those results, does it inform how to refine it and make it a better practice going forward?
There's different reporting requirements at the high level, at the board level. Oh, I also have regular meetings throughout the year with the finance committee. But more operationally, at the leadership level, on the ground level, it's the type of monthly reporting that happens where we've loaded our budget into our accounting software. It produces year-to-date results to year-to-date budget. It tells us, are we on plan, ahead of plan, or behind plan? And that helps us to be proactive and maneuvering. And as we get closer to the end of the year, then we start evaluating, what compromises that may have to happen if we've incurred a negative variance that we hadn't anticipated. Maybe enrollment's a little bit lower than what we had hoped for, or an expense area, uncontrollable expense came up that we had to cover. It means us as a leadership team and the staff below have to make adjustments on the fly. But at the end of the day, we're trying to meet that bottom line, because that's where the society has approved. They've empowered us to spend those monies and do them or spend them wisely. Yeah,
that's great.
So the check-in points on lining it back to the mission, vision, and values is when that regular reporting occurs. Is all of those monies are assigned to different activities. And so I know throughout the budget, as I've highlighted them, these are resources aligned to specific strategic priorities and our values of the school. And I bring it to the attention of the leaders that we haven't used these resources for that purpose. So is there a change, or what are we going to do? And we don't want to necessarily leave money on the table that has been allocated, because we've been called to actually push forward and move forward with these ideas, these values, these things that are important to us. And it's one thing to say, well, we can't do it because we don't have the resources. But if we've allocated the resources, then we're called upon to using them to help us move forward. Mm-hmm. So that's where the reporting and the communication, the 360-degree loop comes into play.
And do sometimes you experience the tension between when you're saying when there's variance, you have to decide between one and the other option, and yet both options could be good, and both options are options you feel you've been called to do. Is there any way, how do you go about deciding which way you should go to cover the loss? Say, so one expenditure line was more than anticipated, meaning that you have to draw back from another line, and to my understanding that so you could cover the difference. Yeah. How do you make that decision when you have to?
I personally don't make that decision. I think what I've tried to lead is that it's not my money. It's our money gifted by God for His purposes through His school. And so I keep coming back to saying I can't create money off trees. There's a limited number of resources that we have. And part of good stewardship is to say, how are they best used? So I keep coming back to how would we establish priorities? And so if you have a positive, negative variance one or the other, how best do we use these resources going forward? I think each one of our leadership team members would have their pet project or whatever, but when you come around the table and you say, well, what's most important? What would be the best investment? The best stewardship of those resources, that should guide us. I can tell you one thing that we're learning as an organization, though, is to put that filter up front to make those decisions. And it hasn't always been that way. And it isn't consistently yet that we say, okay, based on our values or what our mission and vision is, how would we use those resources? but it's always a balancing act. The fact that we have to replace our rooftop units, our HVAC, every year on an ongoing basis, long-term capital, well, how does that really advance our mission as a school? There's not always a direct causal relationship, but we know that if we don't take care of this place, these physical assets, we're not being good stewards either. But how do you tie a rooftop unit into discipleship? So there is always gives and takes and balances, and we just try to manage. There's times when we haven't been able to do significant capital improvements, and in the recent years we've been able to do more. But unless we're listening and communicating and dialoguing and discussing, I don't think we'll ever do a very good job. I think we're doing a better job than what we've done in the past.
So yeah, as you're saying, you're being guided by the vision and mission of the school, as it's the community voice, if you will, and letting the community voice speak into your budget and how it guides you as individuals in making the decisions. So that's something that's coming still strongly through your talk.
My hope, though, is that I'm one person and I don't have direct access to all the community members. So if I look at my peers, like I expect the high school vice principal to have strong communication with the teachers in the high school and the support staff in the high school. What are the needs in the high school that help them go forward? And if it's that we want to do this community project about, using our garden plots in our land next door, then how do I come in alignment to that? How do I pivot? How do I support, etc.? But I wouldn't know those things unless they're filtered up and there's communication happening and ongoing dialogue. I'd be open and vulnerable to say is that in years past, the budget's been a top-down budget where we have so much money and we tell you how much you get and you get and you get. And we're trying to move and switch it and turn that budget process upside down and saying, what are the resources you need at the lower level to accomplish all that you can do and be all that you can be in delivering on our own mission, vision, values as a school? And how do we support that process? But it's hard, a very hard process, because people at all levels of the organization have their regular job to do. For them to think about, well, what resources they need to teach this class or that class is another thing on top of what they're called to do. And so I just have to do all that I can to support and listen, and every opportunity I can is to turn it upside down. And maybe one day we'll be there where you're telling me what you need for a budget and me versus me telling you what I have to share with you. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the idea of grassroots communication that actually begins to form the budget decisions and informing you, so that it helps you say, okay, so how do we've got this approved from our community. These are the things that we need to be stewards of, our finances. Where does it go exactly? And it would sure be nice to hear from the people that are using it so that we can make the best decisions for them.
Yeah. Quite frankly, we've had a curricular budget that, changes a little bit year after year. But every year I come to our high school, middle school, elementary school and say, you have the same amount of money you've had for each of the previous 5 years to spend. Is that appropriate? Is it all that you need? Do you need more? You need less? You don't need as much as you get? But then I rely on each of those people to steward those resources well. I don't tell them how to spend it, but I have to presume that they're spending it well. And they have to make trade-offs in their day-to-day operations of their school or their campuses as well. I'm not micromanaging every dollar of this school, for sure not. I'm just looking and making sure that we're considering all factors and asking questions and prompting and whatever. And when there's a need that we haven't considered, is how do I support to enable it to happen? But I'm far past trying to tell people how they should spend their money.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. This man is a good man, and he has run a ship for, what has it been, 13 years? And we just appreciate it. And thank you, Mike. Really, it was that was very that was very good. And I know that we have much to digest from what you said today, from your experience. So thank you.